This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
Hello, this is the Auburn Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So feedback is greatly important. Feel free to reach out to me either through email, Substack, and other ways to reach out. So some of the audio platforms that I'm on Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. Alright, so this is the Friday episode, so I'm focusing in on all of you. So this time, I'm reaching out and I'm talking about the aspects, particularly going back to Belgium, and I'm going to focus in on the aspects of fashion from Belgium, but from a different city in Belgium. Alright, listen to the next part and you'll find out. Here we go. Okay, Schoten is a city. Alright, so I'm going to get into my thoughts before I get into the facts of everything. Alright, so fashion, old fashioned. Now, I have said this countless times, that you really, as that saying goes, you are what you eat, you are what you wear. Now, when you get into that aspect, what are we actually saying? There's a lot of root and tradition. Honey, remember I told you gotta wear shoes if you want to come outside. There's a lot of root and tradition, and there's a lot of messaging behind what people choose to wear when they go out, wherever the situation is. There's a lot to be said for it. Alright, so also on top of that, the type of attire besides, social attire also speaks a lot about the personality of the person. What are they, saying and reflecting to society? Sometimes it is what it is with what people wear. Now, what I mean by that, not is what it is. It's just very straightforward. And that says a lot about the person's personality, too. They just want to wear, something that's simple, easy, and that get from point A to point B. So that says about the aspects of their personality that they're very practical. And also goes to pinpoint the aspects that they hit the bottom line. They look at the bottom line of everything and just see that point of view. And that's really refreshing when you have that type of mentality to the aspects of, this, that, and the other. And it's very unfortunate to add on to that that's not always the case that, you get that perspective of, oh, that person must be frugal because they have that sort of mentality of a dress. And that's just not really the case. And there's so many different aspects about it. And that's what needs to be sought after and thought about with fashion, particularly the aspects of how fashion is thought in culture, the aspects of how fashion is thought, is addressed and thought, and people's perspective about it. Excuse me just a minute. Okay, so, typically, depends on the certain aspects of fashion. Fashion is thought about this high, grandiose, expectation of attire. So that be really elaborate clothing and everything else. High spectatorship, especially when we get into the aspects of the runway. That's not always the case, too, with the aspects of fashion. A lot of times, to each his own. I can understand that point of view. And it's unfortunate that it's one of those things where, you see it like this with that is true that the spectatorship outweighs the aspects of the designer and the practical use of the brand. And it is, that aspects of designers, particularly showcasing clothes on runways just for spectatorship. They're not really in the realm of clothes that you can wear on a real world basis. Yes, but the ones that merge that aspects of whimsy and fantasy and it's practical, there's a lot to be said about those particular designers. And also another thing to pinpoint out here. So the aspects of European fashion, particularly when we get into Belgian fashion, and then we go into more of the houses of big name houses of fashion, of we get Italian, France, and so forth. So particularly, there's the overall census that these type of countries, brands, industries, they don't cater particularly to the aspects of minorities here. And that's very unfortunate to have that mentality when we get into the aspects of fashion in itself. And again, I think that fashion is another big outlet when it comes to what are people saying, what is the vehicle behind, what is the impact of something. And clothing really does have a huge impact on society. So, to have that sort of mentality, this was some time ago, and there was particular in showcasing in the mainstream media. Oh well, and there was a particular census of saying, oh well, European fashion, particularly in the designing roots of European fashion, it's not really suitable for African American bodies. They need to uphold and change their perspective. Well, that's one perspective that's very narrow and tunnel vision. When you're completely, if you have that mentality, you're completely dismissing the aspects of the type of bodies that are associated with European fashion. Those, bodies, as they say, that are not, catered to. They don't particularly have men who have those types of shapes and forms. And, that's something to say about that. That's just like to say about the aspects of the only true history is the history of minority people, the history of oppression or overcoming oppression. The Olympic circus here. And that's really unfortunate because it's wiping away so many cherished traditions that we have in society. And that's not, yes, baby.
I want my bike at the park.
I know it's not time to go to the park yet, okay?
But that's another way.
Yeah, we're going to go later, okay?
I won't go now.
Baby, don't do that right now.
Mom, but it's not my time.
Come on, sweetie. I'll be right there, okay? Sorry about that, folks. My baby girl. Come on, Piper. You don't want to play with the kittens?
I don't want to wear.
I know you have to be particular with them, okay? Here you go. Now, go outside and go play with the kitten, okay? Play with pumpkin pie, okay? All right. Okay, so back to it. So all I'm saying is that you're not really getting the grand picture of it all and the aspects of that. If you understand and you have your horizons open to other cultures and other history and appreciate other history, you can't really have the appreciation for your own self and your culture too. It's just, those things, it's common sense, but those things correlate with each other, because if you don't respect one thing, how can you respect the other? So I think that's we need to take into consideration with the aspects of that. Particularly when we get into the social, political, impact of fashion when it's mentioned. Particularly we get into, American perspectives about fashion. The agendas that this is the consensus of a fashion designer that's for the people. This is the consensus of a fashion designer that's not for the people. This is a consensus of a consensus that let me say that again. The impact or the consensus of what we think is just in fashion. But again, you're not getting into.
Go to ride my bike at the park?
Not quite. Again, you're missing the point, and that's what needs to be thought of. Yeah, can you understand that, baby girl? And that's what really needs to be thought of when we get into the aspects of everything with fashion and other cultures. With that said, I want to get into facts about particularly Belgium, more facts about Belgian fashion here. Here we go. All right, of course, sources will be provided for you. All right, so here we go. Let's get right into the heart of the matter of everything. All right. Okay. So, Schoten. It's to get into the location of it. It's a municipality located in the Antwerp province of Belgium. So while there is no direct mention of Schoten, specific fashion and history in the provided content, the broader fashion history of Belgium is quite significant, and particularly in Antwerp as well is very well documented. So Antwerp has been a significant hub for fashion, especially with the emerging aspects of the Antwerp Six, which began in the 80s. So a group of influential Belgian designers gained international recognition. So Belgian fashion history dates back to the 19th century, with a rich textile culture that included lace from Burgess and Merchanel line from Flanders, and wool from, don't do that, baby, from Velners. So the country's fashion industry saw a significant transformation and all the way into the 80s. So with Antwerp becoming a center for innovation in avant-garde fashion, the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp has played a crucial role in nurturing talent, producing notable designers such as Martina Martelega, Dries Van Noten, and the Antwerp Six. So the Schoten itself is not directly mentioned in the context of fashion history. It's proximally to the Antwerp and the broader cultural and industry developments in the regions, which suggests that it may have been influenced by fashion trends and innovations original birthplace, as you can say, is from Antwerp. The town's historical sites, such as Schoten Castle, reflect the area's rich heritage, which may have indirectly contributed to the cultural backdrop of the region's fashion scene. So again, as I mentioned before, with other cultures, preserving and protecting heritage is a strong foundation and a strong clue into the mentality of situation or what is significant to culture. And so when you get into the aspects of a culture that is fast-paced, what has came before is not really relevant today, or it's really misunderstood. It's not really wanting to be understood. It's just seen in a negative light. It's not really, nothing. There's no sort of silver lining with the traditions and the roots. That's really cause for destruction and mayhem. So it's very relevant to the aspects of the fall of Rome. So what am I saying? What is the reason behind of saying the fall of Rome? That could be the foreground for cultures that welcome this sort of mentality and not preserving your tradition, your heritage, your roots. So Rome had that mentality, innovative, fast-paced, was here and now and forget the rest. And all these different ideas were surfacing with the aspects of modern life or the aspects of modern thought. And it came to a turning point to where everything was not cohesive, no structure, no sort of sense of root. And out of that destruction, then Rome fell. And how history reflects on Roman culture is quite interesting. When it was good, it was great. And there's a lot of, respect and privilege and thought about the impact of Roman culture. But when it was bad, destruction happened. And there's a lot of lessons into the aspects to avoid that in order to have a flourishing culture. So that's what needs to be also thought about when we get into the aspects of tradition and culture, particularly when cultures preserve that, and how those roots really set a different precedent when we come into modern day life, when we come into the aspects in the sense of fashion too. All right, so I'm going to get into the...
Get into?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Where the baby kid is?
The baby, the last part of my thoughts here about fashion of Belgium. So, I've had it. So, a brief overview of Belgian fashion history in the long 19th century. Okay, so.
Mommy, I want the baby.
You want the baby?
Yes.
Oh, this isn't quite it. I'm sorry about that, folks.
Mommy, I want the baby.
You hold on, cause let's see.
I play with something. I heard the dog.
Play with what, baby?
Mommy, dad.
What, baby?
Oh,
Okay, so how Belgian fashion changed the style in the world forever. Okay. No, you can't play with that, baby.
Mama, play with it.
No. No. Play with something else.
No.
Okay, folks, I'll be right back. All right, so here we go. All right. Sorry about that. I was skipped over what I was really trying to find. So, how Belgian fashion changed the style of forever. So, last year, Belgian designer Rolf Simmons announced the closure of his brand, which was for decades been synonymous with youth culture and fashion's avant-garde. So less than 2 weeks later, Ludolf de Saint-Surin, the buzzy Paris-based designer, was appointed to lead the story of Belgian house of Anne. Forgive me, I'm going to try to pronounce this. De Middelmeesters. So the news rejuvenated interest in the brand that once rocked Paris catwalks with its poet warrior look, but had lost its footing since her de Middelmeester herself retired. So both announcements were turning points in the much larger Cinderella story of this small European country that has produced a stunning number of creative contributions to the fashion industry, from the OGs like Martin Magalada and Dries Van Noten to Simons and his disciples. And that's something to say. I don't agree with saying disciples, but hey, okay. So, quite interesting in having that depiction about the aspects of fashion and oligarchy with Christian undertones there. All right, so, if we go to the six who now had the Alaya and the Bodega Venta, respectively, as well as recent graduates like Martin Sherry and from decades. Belgium has continued to produce top-notch talent. So how did this go about? The Antwerp Six. All right, so in 1986, a group of 6 young fashion designers based in Antwerp loaded up a van with their designs and headed to London's fashion fair. It was the first time they had presented their work to an international audience. With virtually no money and just one model between them, the first day was a disaster. Now, wanting to spring from the most expensive booths, they ended up on the fair's second floor among the boudoir, and not as they had hoped. So on the second day, they made stencil flyers that read, "Come and see the 6 Belgian designers," and began handing them out at the fair's entrance. That worked. So Barney's, the trailblazing New York department store, put in an order with each designer that would introduce them to the American market. The journalist who first question was, "Who are you and where are you from?" struggled with the designers' Flemish names. One of the party blurted out, "Just call us the Antwerp Six." Word soon spread about this group of characters to their unconventional work. None of it, and in a sense, their work, or none of them, made any sense to the cosmopolitan European eyes. Belgium unfairly seemed like a cultural backwater. So the Flemish name of the 6 designers, Dries van Noorten and Dinkelmeester, Walter van Berndock, and Dirk Biekenmerks, and Dirk van Sainz, and Maria Yai, sound different. But one thing was clear: a new phenomenon had been born. There was little that united the 6 designers in terms of style, but there was a sense of youthful energy and a capacity for rethinking fashion, that what was represented and what it was for whom, and what was for the united aspects of the group, their vision of fashion. So until the mid-70s, high fashion was the exclusive domain of the rich, but while the rise of Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood and London, the subsequent adaptation of pop art emerged in Paris by Jean-Paul Gaultier and Claude Monet and Terry Mugler, and the old stained world was beginning to change. So according to Barik Mulut, co-founder of the 2 iconic Antwerp shops, Crocodile and Louis, it was the success of the Yakamota and Komen des Gorons that really gave the 6 their inspiration. So the Japanese showed everyone for the first time that fashion did not have to be about glamour. It showed CDG, for instance, showed their first collection in Paris in 81. So the equal parts acclaim and disdain from the Parisian fashion press. They had no airs about it. They showed in a sparse white space. They did not have a huge budget for their shows, and yet they showed the world that great fashion does not have to come from Paris or Milan. There were other factors that gave the Antwerp 6 their daring to make the kind of fashion they made it understood why they made the fashion that they made, that they wanted to make, that is. The synergy of the youth culture and the fashion that was going on at the time in Belgium had come from to be known for its presence. It was very, very vocal at that time. But the changes were happening swiftly. So the center of change was London. That was the apex, you can say, or the ape of youth culture and change, which is why the 6 ended up there first. So Antwerp is a city well known for a small town feel, where everyone seems to know each other's name or each other, but it punches away above. It goes up way above punches. That's another clue of the aspects of literature from, the aspects of left free thinking. But I see it from this aspect. It's very important to see other people's point of views about things outside of your own. But instead of saying punching, that's really, when you get into the aspects of punching, that's very destructive or volatile. Why can't it be with the aspects of rising above, or figuring out a way to improve, and in that improvement you impact, All right, so it's they relocated and they traveled by train to London, Paris, Amsterdam for inspiration. So, relatively inexpensive and comfortable place to live, which is why most of the designers who graduated from the fashion department of the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, this was the ground zero of Belgian fashion, and it tended to stick around. Another big factor was that unlike France, Italy, or England, Belgium did not have a big fashion tradition. They were free to make what they wanted, how they wanted, at the same time, despite having no couture heritage to speak of. There was a clothing manufacturer based in Belgium that had realized it was falling behind its European neighbors. So in 81, the year 3 of the Antwerp 6 graduated, a Belgian Textile Association was born, which instituted a award for Belgian fashion called the Golden Spindle. So, and De Middelminster won their first competition with the rest of the Antwerp 6 as runners-up. All right, so one designer, I'm going to end on this. One designer conspicuously absent from the foundation of the myth of the Belgian fashion is Martin Magel. Though he is often enormously named as one of the Antwerp 6, the designer made his way alone. After graduating from the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in 80, unlike the Antwerp 6, he did not stick around. His lifelong dream, after seeing the futuristic creation of French designer André Cortiz's, believe the pronunciation of that, as a child, was to be a fashion designer in Paris. So by 84, Magrel had secured an assistant designer position with Jean-Paul Gaultier, who was anointed with the infamous terrible of fashion. French fashion was rocking Paris catwalks with his camp extravaganzas. So out of this, they made a name for themselves in 1987. Margot left Gaultier, and the following year founded Mason Martin Magrel with the business partner of Jenny Mersens, who owned a boutique in Brussels. So in the fall of 88, the house held its first show in Paris, though elongating and destructive DIY vibes of the garments. So the rest, as they say, is how he made even more of his name. And so these are testaments with the aspects of that adage of finding really a rock in a hard place, really figuring out how to make your own, and when there's not a whole lot to work with. And there's something to be said about the aspects of how different fashion designers behind the scenes, who the people are behind the clothing that you're wearing or behind the brand name. There's something to be said about that too. All right, so I'd like to know what you all think about this episode. Feel free to reach out. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.